Number 9. USS Lexington. Paul Allen, one of the founders of Microsoft, along with his more well-known counterpart, Bill Gates, has become fairly well-known for another reason. In fact, Mr. Allen has played a key role in locating World War II shipwrecks and laying descendants of those who were aboard these vessels' minds at rest. In 2018, he explored the coast of Queensland in Australia, where he and his team discovered the remains of an icon of American combat, the USS Lexington, or Lady Lex. The warship hadn't been seen since 1942, when it took part in the Battle of the Coral Sea. This epic fight against the Japanese happened soon after the attack on Pearl Harbor, with Australia forming the battleground when it became clear the enemy was advancing. A brutal chapter of the war, it helped contribute to the weakening of deadly Japanese firepower on the sea. Sadly, the Lexington didn't survive the onslaught. It was hit and went down with a crew of 216. A further 35 US aircraft also fell to the Japanese. The relatives of those on board have faced a long and painful wait for answers over the past 8 decades. Now, they finally have the location of where their loved ones ended up, a reported 800 kilometers from the coast of Queensland. The sighting of the Lexington's nameplate confirmed that the ship has indeed been found. It's incredible that it took so long, but it also gives you an idea of the enormous scale the war was fought on. Even in the 21st century, there are long-buried secrets waiting to be discovered so people can heal. Number 8. HMS Urge. In 1942, a U-class submarine from Britain was hit while traveling en route to Alexandria in Egypt. This was wartime, and tragically, such things happen. But the thing is, no one quite knew what happened to the sub, which was known as the HMS Urge. The truth finally came to light, with news reported in 2019 that the remains of the vessel and no less than 44 crew members had been located near the coast of Malta. Lying around 400 feet below the surface of the Mediterranean Sea, HMS Urge was also notable for having been found in good condition. Thankfully, investigators had discovered the wreck first before anyone else could interfere with the site. What brought down the sub? It's believed a mine was behind the tragedy. The HMS Urge is by no means alone when it comes to having spent a long period lost at sea. Reports state that 13 such submarines never returned from active duty, leaving unanswered questions and anxious families. Many of these vessels have been found, but this often occurs decades later, adding to the pain. Number 7. The Virginia. This was an oil tanker that was sunk by German torpedoes during World War II. At the time, the tanker was stationary at the Mississippi River in the Gulf of Mexico. Sadly, 27 crew members died in the 1942 attack. Years later, in 2001, the wreck of the Virginia was found again. However, it wasn't archaeologists looking for clues who discovered the tanker, but an exploration team working for the energy industry. Their sonar uncovered the Virginia, which led to the inevitable question: what were they gonna do with it? In an interesting move, it was decided to keep the ship where it was and use it as a helpful tool to study the movement of the seafloor. How does that work? Well, the Gulf is an important area for energy companies, who have pipelines there along with other infrastructure. Seafloor studies are useful in attempting new solutions to potential disasters caused by ruptured or damaged pipelines caused by nature's interference. By observing how the Virginia reacts to such events, the team can get a better idea of what seafloor behavior is going on down there. The Virginia reportedly sits in 200 meters of water, meaning it is truly part of the ecosystem. It may be an unusual move for sure, and the tragedy of losing the crew is still foremost in a lot of people's minds. However, it's fascinating to hear that a World War II wreck, and an oil tanker no less, can play a role in studying a natural environment.
Number 6.
Enigma. From broken down shipwrecks to broken code machines, Enigma machines associated with World War II, the machines designed and used by the Nazis to encode their messages, were mostly destroyed during the tail end of the fighting and are an extremely rare find. The last place you may expect to find one is underwater, but that's precisely what happened in the Baltic Sea in late 2020. and the crew scanning the seabed were actually from the Worldwide Fund for Nature. They sought to clear away old and obstructive fishing nets and got more than they bargained for with this rusty chunk of military history. How did an Enigma machine wind up in the sea? Well, thanks to the codebreakers at Bletchley Park, the messages detailing how it occurred were revealed. In 1945, Germany was facing defeat, so it made sense to trash their kit and prevent the Allies from finding out any more secrets. Enigma machines on subs appear to have gone down with the ship, part of a tactic known as scuttling. The theory is that this machine was released into the water in 1945. As reports state, the machine is in far from showroom condition. That said, the Enigmas were ordered to be destroyed, so any traces that remain of these dramatic times are welcome. It took many decades, but perhaps this little machine's story can finally be told. Number 5. USS Johnston. What is the deepest shipwreck of World War II, and indeed of all time, that we know of? That would be the USS Johnston, a naval destroyer that was sunk during the Battle of Leyte Gulf in 1944. The crew were noted for their bravery as they took on a sizable Japanese threat in the Philippine Sea. In a separate part of the fight known as the Battle of Samar, they and other vessels faced great danger together. Over the course of 2.5 hours, they attacked the enemy, but ended up overwhelmed. They had to abandon ship with a loss of 186 souls out of a crew of 327. While they didn't win the day, this battle proved enormously damaging to the Japanese overall. After sinking below the surface, the USS Johnston descended approximately 180 feet, where it rested largely unseen by human eyes. Then in 2021, reports came in that the wreck was being properly studied, mapped, and filmed. A team spent a couple of days giving the site a good going over, meaning that the world can witness the details of the USS Johnston for the first time since the war. It's easy to see these sunken vessels as dead shipwrecks, yet these discoveries are noted not only for revealing military hardware, but also throwing light on the human stories. The mapping and exploration of this wreck is credited to a US-based private company called Caladan Oceanic. Using the research vessel, the DSV Limiting Factor, the company was able to survey the wreck that was actually more than 100 feet deeper than originally speculated. This was the deepest shipwreck exploration in history. Are you interested in exploring shipwrecks, particularly those from the World War II era? Tell us in the comments below, and make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel as well when you do. Number 4. Major Submarine Find. The fight against Hitler in World War II involved using everything at the American military's disposal to help defeat the oncoming threat. One of the subs put into action dated back to 1918 and was called the R-12. It was the oldest sub used during the war, but there wasn't an expectation that this could go out there and engage in combat with the enemy. But it functioned perfectly well as a trading craft. That was until a tragedy happened in 1943. While out in the Florida Keys on a practice run, it took on water and quickly sank. And it may have remained hidden from public eyes indefinitely were it not for explorer Tim Taylor and his partner Christine Dennison. They went out and located the R-12, which was approximately 600 feet down. It was then a question of informing the families, some of whom traveled out to pay tribute by scattering flowers in the water. This sense of closure is reportedly what motivates Taylor and his team, and they haven't just traced one sub. Up to the present day, they have found 5 sunken subs from World War II alone. The story of the R-12 is a reminder that not all of these vessels went down as a result of being in conflict. Everyone put their lives at risk, from soldiers and sailors on the front line to those who trained them. Number 3. Fallen Soldiers. In 1944, a B-24 Liberator bomber was headed back to base in Italy following a confrontation with German flyers. They'd gone out to target oil refineries and strike a blow against the Nazis. However, the Germans had badly damaged the plane. It was sadly the end of the line for this bomber, named the Tulsa American, and its 10 crew members. 7 survived, but 3 went missing after the craft hit the waters of the Adriatic by the Croatian coast. Not only was this a tragedy for the families of the men who were lost, it was also the final moments of a piece of aviation history. You see, the Tulsa American was the last Liberator to roll off the production line over in Oklahoma, so it became doubly significant when the wreck of the Tulsa American was found in 2010. Uncovering the B-24 and its lost crew members has been compared by some to the story of Amelia Earhart. While that case remains unresolved, this provides at least some comfort to the families of the fallen. It took years for details to come to light, but human remains were located, together with remnants of the plane, such as life preservers and other details. What happened on impact is that the nose and cockpit peeled away, which sounds really dramatic. The B-24 then sank to a depth of over 130 feet. As we've seen from other entries on this rundown, it can be decades before the wrecks are discovered and brought to light again. Once the Tulsa American was found, there was a long wait while the remains were studied and identified. One of the deceased crew members, pilot Eugene Ford, was taken to Arlington National Cemetery in 2018. Ford's son fought in Vietnam and is also laid to rest there. Number 2. SS Thistlegorm. This British vessel was used by the Merchant Navy and was sunk in the Red Sea in 1941 after a bomber attack. It had only been in the water for a year, having been constructed in Sunderland, England. She went to Glasgow and then set out to Alexandria, Egypt to play her part in the war effort. The SS Thistlegorm was supposed to reach Alexandria via the Suez Canal. However, this was blocked due to an accident. The Thistlegorm dropped anchor nearby, but unfortunately, it wouldn't proceed any further. It was during this time that it was hit and went down. Located at the Sinai Peninsula's southern tip, the ship went on to become one of the most explored World War II wrecks on record. The site is accessible for trained divers, owing to its exposed nature. Those who ventured down can see something of a treasure trove because the Thistlegorm's cargo is still there and in great condition considering what happened. Unlike others on our list, the Thistlegorm didn't have to wait too long before being found post-war. The world-famous marine explorer Jacques Cousteau went to the Red Sea in the early 1950s. He relied on local fishermen to pinpoint the wreck before bringing some of its contents to the surface. Unfortunately, this was a brief taste of fame for the vessel, which got people's attention again once diving increased in the area around the 1990s. With a resort in place, the SS Thistlegorm turned into a tourist attraction. Despite the fun, it's important to remember the role it played in the conflict and its status as a historical relic. Number 1. F4U Corsair. Our final entry is a World War II era plane, yet one that met a watery fate 3 years after the war ended. While it may have initially survived the conflict, it did meet its end not long after. This Corsair aircraft was flying in the vicinity of the Hawaiian island of Oahu in 1948 when it finally gave up the ghost. The engine reportedly failed and the pilot had to make an emergency landing on the water's surface. Thankfully, the pilot was okay and managed to make it out and back to land. As for the plane, it wasn't so lucky and sank approximately 115 feet below the surface. There, it became part of the ecosystem. Those who dive to view it will probably notice the community of eels that call the spot home. A visit to the Corsair aircraft comes with a hefty note of caution. This is a trip for experienced divers only. Mention has been made of the treacherous conditions in that stretch of water, which can take unsuspecting folk by surprise. You're also advised to be in the company of a guide. Whether they are perfectly preserved ships or the warped remains of a proud fleet, underwater shipwrecks capture a moment in time. The effort needed to find and explore these sites is rewarded by a glimpse into a very different time. These wartime examples are especially evocative. Thanks for watching. Are there any cool underwater discoveries from World War II you think we left off the list? Let us know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe and see you soon. See you next time. Bye.